Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Welcome to another painting demo. Today we're going to paint this airport scenery using my new paper from Hahnemühle. So for this specific one, I did a value study first with a cheaper paper and a smaller paper. So for the value study, obviously this is not a final painting, so my drawing for this one is pretty loose. So I just want to get the big shape on the paper and start to do the value painting as fast as I can. So I'm using a very dull 4B pencil, just going very loose on it. But I still keep in mind of the basic perspective and so on. Now the main thing in this scenery is the airplane. So the airplane sort of established the overall perspective for this scenery. So I have everything else follows that. So I took this photo a couple years ago actually. It's been a while since I was able to travel with airplane. Last time I traveled with the airplane is actually going to Andy Evenson's workshop in California, and that was early last year. So I actually missed travel quite a lot. We actually booked a flight back to Taiwan this summer, but the flight got canceled again because of the COVID. So I was feeling pretty sad about it, and out of that I just decided to paint an airplane scenery. And as I going through my photos, I found this shot and I decided to paint it. This specific scenery, different from the other airplane scenery I painted before, is a sunny one. The one I painted before is a rainy scenery, so the cloud is darker and we got some reflections on the ground. This one we got a strong lighting from the sun, so the color is a lot more vibrant and there's a lot more contrast. So that's why I'm doing a value study first, because I want to simplify the value that I see to really get that nice sense of sunlight. So the first wash of my value study is the middle value. So as you can see from the background, I connect that to the jet bridge to the dark side of the airplane. And then I also connect that to the landing gear and the shadow underneath and all that. So at this point I decided the whole ground is going to be middle value, because I figured that is the only way to make the light on the airplane pops. So even though the whole ground is lit by the sun, as you can clearly see there's a cast shadow from the airplane, that doesn't mean that I want to keep it light. Because if the ground is light, then there's nothing going to be lighter than that. So there's not going to be any difference between the ground and the white of the airplane and the sky. So your mind will always try to trick you, saying that it's lit by the sun, so therefore it must be light. Here is the first wash for the value study, and as you can see, the middle value already start to give the airplane its structure and form. So here I start with my finished color painting. Now I already did the drawing, so I just skipped this part. The only thing you need to know is that this drawing is bigger, so I come back with a mechanical pencil, do a much more detailed drawing, but everything else remains the same. So I am pre-wetting the sky area and starting to make some sky color, and I want a little bit of blue sky as opposed to what's in the photo, which is like a overcast side with a bunch of clouds. So painting some sky in, wet onto wet, and I start to paint some shadows on the cloud to make them feels a little bit more volume. So this is the Hahnemühle paper, and this is actually the second time I use this paper. So the first thing I noticed with this paper is that the color shows up very, very well in this paper. However, this paper dries a lot faster than the other paper that I used to use, like Baohong and Arches and even Saunders, I feel. So it gets a little bit harder to connect the shape in one consistent wash, even though I'm trying to work a little bit faster. So here I am just trying to do the first wash. It's just a overall color of light, so I'm definitely going to go over some of this. Now I'm trying to be a little bit more careful when it comes to the airplane. I try to paint around it just to preserve the light. But other than that, everything else I can just paint it over, just give it an overall general warm and cool tone and the color of the light. Now while you're trying to keep your first wash clean, I think first wash is really important because it gets your mindset into the painting. Like once you put down the first wash in, the white paper isn't that scary anymore because you're already starting to paint something on it. It's not a perfectly white paper anymore. So I would encourage you to just get on with it and paint a nice first wash. And you can even make it a little bit more transparent if you're afraid to go a little bit too dark. So here the ground is a little bit warm because the ground color does reflect a little bit onto the airplane. The airplane paint is actually kind of reflective, so you get a little bit of that on the airplane. So first wash is the color of the light, so get that warm and cool color in. So also the cool color on the dark side of the airplane. And I soften the edge with a damp brush, so you got a soft transition from light to dark. So this is the first wash, and it's just the color of the light. Despite that, there's a little bit of the value. So now is the actual second wash, which is the first wash of the value study, the middle value. So there's going to be a lot of the connection made in this wash. So I start to paint the hangers in the background, this blue color, and also have a little bit of turquoise in that Alaska logo area. So I try to paint around the Alaska logo there, but later on I kind of regret that because I can just paint that small part back with the white gouache. And every time when you are caught up by detail and you slow down a little bit too much, the wash will suffer because it will start to dry. And especially for this paper, which I just mentioned, that it dries a little bit faster than any other paper that I work with. It is also very soft. So you can see some of the wash is not as consistent as I would like it to be. However, the color still shows up very, very nice. It didn't really fade off all that much compared with a lot of other paper. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you don't mind this to dry a little bit sooner and you really care about the color showing very vibrantly on your paper, Hahnemühle is actually a very nice paper to work with. So maybe if you're painting flower or something like that, some natural scenery with a lot of color, this can be a good choice for you. But if you're like me, trying to make big washes and trying to connect a lot of different shapes, this can be a little bit hard to work with. Or I might just need to keep spraying some waters and keep the paper wet. Either way, I'm still pretty happy with the result of this painting, so it doesn't really matter. I go just a little bit darker so I don't need to keep painting over it later. So even though this is supposed to be middle value, sometimes I do break that rule just a little bit. So here painting the jet bridge. So while I'm trying to connect the shape, I'm also trying to shift the value just a little bit. But the overall value should still be around the middle value. So moving down to that pipe here, and I also add some yellow. And again, all while I'm trying to connect the shape as well, so I'm also painting the ground. Okay, so I'm painting that, and also again I'm bringing in some of the colors on the ground onto the airplane. We need to darken that dark side of the airplane just a little bit more. And now this brings out the contrast of the light and the dark on the airplane. And remember to soften the edge of the core shadow. So here I got caught up with the detail a little bit. So as you can see, I forgot about the wash on the right. So I actually didn't continue that wash down. And then I started to realize that, oops, and then the wash is dry. So I have to go back and just paint all over again. Because if I just paint the edges, it's very likely that it's going to result in cauliflower edges. So I just end up repaint the whole thing so that the wetness is going to be consistent. So continue the wash, and I add a little bit of the yellow there. And again, continue the wash, paint the whole ground floor. And I leave a little bit of light for the equipments and the truck. And again, try to do a little bit of wet onto wet on the airplane floor just to give it a little bit of texture. So here's the first two wash for the color painting. You can see it side by side with the value study. Okay, so let's continue the value study. I need to paint the dark value in it. So I decided to leave the blue paint a little bit lighter, and I just paint the inside of the hanger just to give it a little bit more depth. So the darker area for the jet bridge and also the pipe and stuff. Dark value is very good for you to define and separate things a little bit more within the middle value. So by painting the dark value, things become even more clear. If you have a strong major shape with middle value, some dark shape in the right place is going to help it tremendously. So the landing gear, and I'll connect that to the cast shadow from the airplane and darken the front windshield. And now you can really start to see the light popping on the airplane. Painting the dark turbine, and also define those ground equipment a little bit more, adding some dark underneath, and also adding the cast shadow. And also paint a little bit of the figure, which is something that I actually forgot for the color version, which I will paint those in later with gouache. But I actually didn't work in tandem when I was painting the value study and the color version. I just break it up for you to see the process. I actually finished the value study in one go and then paint the color version the next day. But I believe showing this in tandem, you get to see how I think about middle value and the dark value, how I do the color and the value study. And again, this is not coming from me. I learned that from Andy Evenson, so a lot of credit goes to him. I just try to practice what he taught me. And it does really help me to advance my painting and my sense of value and composition. So here's the finished value study. I really like how it turns out, so it gives me a lot of confidence when I'm painting the color version. So here I am starting to paint the dark in a hanger. Now this is going to be a lot darker than the blue paint on the outside of the hanger. I just want to separate them a little bit, even though they're supposed to be the same value if you squint your eyes. So sometimes I do make my own decisions that's going to work better for the painting. Remember, it's your painting, so you don't have to copy the photo one-to-one. If you have better idea and if you know by adjusting something, change something is going to make the painting look better, then go for it. You don't always have to copy the photo exactly the way you see. So the background dried a little bit, so I want to just add a little bit more dark while it is still a little bit damp, just to get some soft details in the back. Now by painting the dark value, you can already start to feel that the light on the airplane feels a lot brighter because now we have a reference point how dark the value can go in this painting. So this will contrast how light the white is. The white part of the airplane is actually just the white paper. I actually didn't paint anything on it. So that white by itself didn't get any brighter, but with the dark painted in, the contrast is making it brighter. Adding the dark on the jet bridge. Bring that shadow out just a little bit and add a little bit more dark on the airplane. Now this dark is actually not as dark as the dark value. I just bring that out a little bit to just add a little bit more contrast and reflection on the airplane. So just by adding a little bit dark in the right place, things start to pop and things starting to have structures. Now I'm painting the cast shadow from the airplane. This is a tough part. I want to preserve a little bit of the yellow, but some of the yellow is actually darker, so I just paint it over. And it's very easy to get lost in the detail if you're not careful. So sometimes when I painted a little bit, I will squint my eyes and paint just so that it forced me to see the big picture instead of individual details. So here I paint the landing gear, which is pretty much just some brush strokes. You don't really need to define it all that much. And here I paint the yellow lines on the ground. I didn't want to paint around them because there's going to be a lot of troubles, and with this paper dry a little bit faster, that's not going to be a good idea. I will be slowing down too much and the wash will suffer. So the dark side of the turbine and the dark interior inside the turbine, those really needs to be dark. So make sure you have some dark mixture. Connect that with the cast shadow and carefully paint around the shape of the jet. So this really makes the nose of the jet pops. Connect that to the dark underneath of the equipments. I think this is where they load the luggage and supplies and things like that. I'm not really familiar with that vehicle. So there's some details on top of the equipment, the platform, but I'm just very loosely hinted those. Those are not the focus of this painting, the airplane is. So as long as you paint some small shapes in the right place, the viewers will perceive them as details. Painting the windshield of the truck. This is really a small part of the painting, so I'm not really going to detail that much. And I actually just connect the front and the side since they're both in the shadow. And I just connect that to the cast shadow of the truck. I don't really bother separating them, so I treat them as one single shape essentially. But again, as long as the shape looks right and you paint the shape in the right place, it's going to read. So a lot of time it's not more detail that makes your painting believable, it's right shape at the right place. So a good loose painting is not painting things very fast, is you are able to achieve believable result with minimum amount of brushstroke, painting right shape at the right place. Giving the cast shadow another layer just to make it a little bit darker. So the painting is almost done, so I just come back in and add some more dark detail here and there. Darkening that yellow pipe because it feels a little bit too light now. It's actually inside of the shadow, so you don't want to make it too bright. It shouldn't pop out in the unreasonable way. If you squint your eyes, it's also blend into the cast shadow. So here I'm starting to paint the figures. For some reason, I completely forgot about them when I'm painting the color version. So I quickly go back in with a thick yellow paint and some dark for the leg and the cast shadow, a tiny little bit of head, but this is pretty much all we really need since they are really small. They're just tiny little small shapes that's there for scale reference. So here is the finished painting side by side with the finished value study. And again, Hahnemühle's paper dries a little bit. And again, Hahnemühle's paper dries a little bit faster, but the color, as you can see, shows up pretty well. I hope you enjoyed this demo and painting. Stay safe and healthy. I hope all this will be over soon so we can all go out and travel and see the world again. If you like my video, please consider give it a like and subscribe. You can also go to my website at cafewatercolor.com, sign up to get my Fast Track Watercolor PDF guide and some exclusive video. This is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. See you next time.